Okay, so we're now up to covering. It can be a little bit of a black art. I wouldn't get too hung up about it. Basically, there's some very simple rules. Make sure that your bench is nice and tidy and is dust free. Make sure you've got either very sharp scissors or you've just gone to a new blade with your sharp knife or scalpel. Now, the things you're going to need, apart from a clean bench, you can get the covering from Angel Wing Designs, and they're doing a special range. It's called Solar Lights. It's quite a light covering. You could use a standard solar film covering or plastic shrink covering, but you will find it just does make the model slightly heavier. I think if you're going to do doing plenty of slope flying, don't think that's going to be a major issue, but weight is something just to be aware of. Now, how are we going to do it? So you can buy a commercial iron like so, and it's got a temperature control on it, and I'm going to go through how to set up the temperature controls in a minute. Now, if this is your first build and you think to yourself, oh, I've got to buy more stuff, don't panic. What you can do is, if this is your first build, the first go at covering, you can use a domestic iron. Now, my advice is you can buy, I think Tesco's and Asda are selling like irons for like £15–16. It's quite heavy to use, this is quite a small structure. So if you don't want to invest in big bucks and you're thinking, oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to take the hobby up full time, find yourself a travel iron. The travel irons are very light and they'll work just as well. So I think you can get them on sort of Amazon and eBay. I think they're something like £12–15, but worth thinking about doing if this is your first point of call of doing any covering. So I'll just sort of give you some options, and also the other reason for doing it is it means you haven't got to invest in lots of mega money if you're not sure this is a hobby you're going to take up. But I'm sure once you've built it, yeah, this will be the light in the fuse to a hobby that's going to last a long time. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with the simplest part of the structure, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to get the rudder, not the fin, and I'll tell you why and not the fin a little bit later, but we're just going to start with the fin, sorry, the rudder, not the fin. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to do the tail plane and the elevator as well, but I'm just going to talk you through, there's a couple of little steps as we go along, but I'll just try and guide you as slowly and skillfully as possible. Right, golden rule for covering is I have cleaned my bench down, I've swept over everything, and I've also gone over everything with a hoover, and now I've got some, these are just sterile wipes. You can buy anti-static wipes, and the reason we need to make sure is, the reason I'm using this is to make sure I've got a clean work surface, but the main reason is we want to be absolutely dust free. Okay, so I've got my iron heating. I've got it set about just over halfway at the moment. Now, a couple of little tips. Make sure you've got somewhere to put your iron down safe. So I've just got an old milling block there, and I can leave mine safe so it's off the bench and not causing any damage. Also, you want to make sure that wherever you leave it, it doesn't cool the iron down. Another good tip is, if you're buying a commercial iron, you'll find it's got a little sock that's come on it. Unfortunately, my sock wore off years ago. So what I do is I've got a little pad there of tissue, and every now and again I'll just give it a little bit of a wipe on there, and that's just to get off in case you get any residue building up. Now, right, this is a little bit of scrap that I've cut out from the kit. So there's a little bit of an end plate there, and it came off from here, so it's a scrap bit we don't need. Now, you'll notice with your film that it's got a sort of shiny side and there's a matte side. Now, the interesting thing is that it has a protective film to actually get, you have to remove off. So there you go, look, I'm taking that off like so. Now, you have to remember that this here that you're peeling off is the adhesive side. Now just watch what happens when I take that off like so. I've done that as a demonstration. Look at the static on there, has picked up that little bit of tissue. That's why I'm saying to you, you must make sure that your bench is dust free and clean, because if you can pick up that bit of tissue, it will pick up little bits of balsa or the odd bit of junk you got lying about. So just as a test there, so whenever you peel your plastic off, always go straight in the bin. So we now know that this is the matte side, and if you look at it very carefully, it still says slightly matte, and you've got a glossy side, so I'm just laying that on the top like so. Now, this is purely an experiment, and sometimes I'll do this just to make sure that I've got the iron at the right temperature before I actually start work on the plane. The reason I do that is because I'm working in a cabin I've built in the garden, and obviously the temperature and the humidity fluctuates quite a lot. So I'm holding both sides, and all I'm going to do is keep the iron moving. Now that has gone on very, very well, and I suspect it actually might be a little bit too hot. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to move that one there like so. But you see how I'm just keeping the iron moving. So what I've done is I've just popped that on there. Now, the thing we have to be aware of, particularly when we're doing small structures like the rudder and the fin, is this stuff is actually quite powerful. And what you need to be careful of is that if you over shrink it and go absolutely mad, going, whoa, look at this, this is fantastic. What will happen is if you shrink it too much, boom, you've curved it. Now there's a possibility that when we come over and do this side, that it's going to balance itself out. But it is something, and you notice how when I'm doing this, that I am never keep the iron in the same place. I'm moving it round all the time, like so. Now, if you keep your iron on there too long, what will happen is you'll end up with a massive burn. Let me just show you. Also, you'll end up getting, see how that's puckered it right up. So you just need, the golden rule is just keep the iron moving. Now, so, got our covering off. The plastic's gone in the bin. I have my iron. I'm just giving it a bit of a wipe to make sure the surface is clean. Now, all I'm going to do is I am just going to stretch that down, and I am very quickly just going to tack very quickly the whole way up, just to keep it in its position. And what we're actually doing, see, I'm just actually pulling it slightly tighter with my fingers, not going mad. And you'll notice I've got an edge. There's an edge all the way around. The reason being is we want to actually just roll this film just over the edge. I've got one last little bit here, look. Now, don't worry if you're looking at that going, oh, Nick, it's a little bit wrinkly. At the moment, as long as we've got no massive creases in it, and also, now, so I'll turn that over because that was just beginning to bow. Now, I'm just going to leave that a second just to cool. The next process now is that what we're going to do is, that's finished like so. Now, at the moment, it's not perfect. I wouldn't expect it to be perfect. So the idea is I'm going to flip that over and hold it down. Now, this is where we've got to think about, we're going to be folding the film over. We only want just the minimal coverage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a cut here. See why we need a very sharp knife. And I'm going to need a cut there. Oh, I made a right bod of that, Nick. See how I'm getting rid of the debris straight away. So, cut there. And a cut there. Same thing again. Cut here. And a cut here. And if anybody has any other advice about how you do this, I'm more than happy for people to make comments down below the video. Right, there we go. Woo! Back in shot. So now what we've actually done there is we've now got it, made it easier to be able to roll these bits over. And so we get our iron. Now if you can, it's going to be easier, particularly these little tags. I would normally advise just rolling it over, hanging it over the bench and doing it, but for demonstration purposes I'm just going to do this on here to make it easier for you to see without me having to redo a camera shot. So I'm just doing that like so. Can you see what I've done? But you could do this off the end of the bench or this tin, but notice still keeping the iron moving. And then once they're over, now see, I'm just going to tack that down. Tack that down. Now I personally, from years of experience, would rather hold this up now, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to virtually run this rudder like so, and then all I'm going to do because it's such a small structure, it's very easy to do. So I've just given that a lick round like so. And then I'm going to pop that on the bench. Right, so one side done. It's not perfect on this side just yet. There are some tiny little bits of I can't call them folds. It hasn't quite shrunk down. Don't panic at the moment. I don't want to overheat this because this is so thin. I now want to go and cut another piece. Now this piece we're going to cut is going to be shorter, so I'm not going to be doing the 5mm overlay all the way round. I want to try and make this bit basically to size. So I'm now going to cut this to size. And a little tip when you're doing these small structures, it's worth just doing it on the edge. Now you see where I've got this plastic edge there for the end of the film. It's going to make it dead easy with my old man's sight to be able to cut that out and remove the plastic. So what I'm actually doing here is I'm doing that like so. I'm doing that like so. Holding that. Now I wouldn't advise using a biro to try and mark this out because the biro will leach through the film. You could use a very sharp pencil if you want to mark areas out, and just make sure we haven't got that tag on there. There we go, put that away safely. Now this is my second bit, which I'm right. I finally managed to get that off in the bin. Now this is the second half, and you will find that the other nice feature about rolling that edge over is that the second bit of film will actually adhere quite nicely to the film that's there already. So same thing again. very quickly. I'm just going to tack this round. See how I'm using my fingers just to pull it straight, like so. I've got a little bit, just as a little bit proud, just going to lift that over there like so. Just make sure we've gone round all the edges. But the golden rule here is look how I'm keeping the iron moving. Now, what you can do now to get a nice finish is I'm just going to put a little bit of tissue over this. I'll rub it over like so, but I've only done a couple of quick wipes. Then I'm going to go over the other side. So what I'm doing is I'm evenly distributing the heat. That way we make sure that we don't get a curve. And when I've finished, I'm just going to leave that, put the iron down safely. Just going to leave that 30 seconds just to cool, because these structures are so small that the iron is having an effect on the balsa. There we go. Now I've got one little edge there. Just finished. You don't have to use the tissue, it's just a technique I've developed, and if you've got one of those little socks, that will do it for you. But I'm trying to just do it, I won't say it's on the cheap, but I'm just trying to make it accessible for everybody. There you go. One rudder done. Now, my advice is, if you can, just make sure that you can put that somewhere safe, and also that it's flat, and it wouldn't hurt just to put a little bit of gentle weight on that, because that will take a few moments for the temperature to stabilize, because as I said earlier, at this thinner structure, using this iron is going to have some effect on the balsa as well, and you just want the whole thing to dry. But that's lovely. So you've seen how to do that. The elevator is exactly the same. Just be careful, it's very long, very easy to warp, so you can do exactly the same. The fin is exactly the same. I'll warn you now, good luck with that. I'll be honest with you, if I was designing that kit, I'd either make this about 3 times the size, or I wouldn't even bother with it. So if you've got to this bit and you've broken that off a couple of times, you've joined a very elite club, and so that you can do as well. Just be careful when you're pulling that up. Now, the only other thing we need to do is we need to cover the main part of the tailplane. Okay, just wanted to add a little tip here. I've done a blank elevator in the same dimensions as the elevator I've covered, but I just want to allay your fears. I've just only covered one side of this. Now, if I apply too much heat with this, look what's going to happen is it begins to get a massive bow in it. Don't panic. If you just turn that over, hold it down, and just run the iron over the other side, and just hold it flat, what will happen is you'll take the bow out. So if you do find when you're doing your elevator it starts to get a bit of a bow in it, don't panic. Just take your time with the heat, and then when you found you've got the other side on as well, that you'll be able to just adjust any little bits of curve that might build into it, because as I said, it's a very thin structure and it's very easy to get warps in it. Just take your time and just be gentle with the heat. Okay, so this is the tailplane, the elevator, the fin and the rudder. They're all covered. I've got to be honest with you, I know I've made this a fairly lengthy video, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop at this point for this particular video, because I just don't want it to go on and on and on. I think the next video is going to be all about just covering the fuselage, as otherwise I wanted to try and include some of the tips and tricks with the first parts that we're covering. Hopefully it's gone well for you. I'm going to add the horn, or the horns that go to control these surfaces, at a later date, and talk through how we're going to do how we're going to hinge these materials, because there are some different alternatives for doing that. But at the moment, I think for this video I'm going to call it a day.